Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Summer, the moon is the source of food grains, strength and longevity of all the demigods. He is also the master of all vegetation and the source of generation of all living entities. As stated by learned scholars, the moon is the mind of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all opulences, be pleased with us. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Sama, the predominating deity of the moon, is the source of food grains and therefore the source of the strength even for the celestial beings, the demigods. He is the vital force of all vegetation. Unfortunately, modern so-called scientists who do not fully understand the moon describe the moon as being full of deserts. Since the moon is the source for our vegetation, how can the moon be a desert? The moonshine is the vital force of all vegetation, and therefore we cannot possibly accept that the moon is a desert. Vanchkalpa Krushika, Kripa Sindhuvacha, Vaishnava, Vaishnava Namaha, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadada, Shivasti Gopalnavinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada never minces his words, does he? But it's interesting that the Moon King is especially close to Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit loved to hear the glories of the Moon King. Why did he want to hear the glories of the Moon King? Because that's where the Yadu dynasty comes from. The Sun King, although comes before the Moon King, was not really favourable to Maharaj Parikshit, because that's where the dynasty of Ram comes from. However, Arjuna, who is the dynasty from the Moon King, brings Krishna. If it wasn't for the conversation between Shri Krishna and Arjuna, how many of us would be here today? Very glorious, isn't it? So I've been asked to say a few words on this particular purport, and it immediately reminded me of my time in university. Although I trained the traditional way in nursing, we then had to go on and do a university degree, because apparently nobody had respect for nurses unless we have a degree. So we were forced to go to university. While there, I met a young gentleman who was doing his master's degree. And he was very interesting because he was one of the very few people I know that has touched a piece of the moon. So he was doing his master's, and he were looking at the mineral contents of moon rock, and I thought this was really interesting. I hadn't met the devotees and I hadn't had this wonderful knowledge, but I kept in touch with him, and at the end of the master's degree I said, well, what have you learnt about the moon? I was really excited, because it's not every day that you meet somebody that has touched a piece of the moon. His conclusion was very, very, very disappointing. It turns out that there's quite a few places on Earth that has this particular type of rock in that particular composition. They had concluded, though, then after sampling this one rock, that there is no life on the moon. This is modern scientists. We take one little piece of information and then we add on so many different bits that the one piece of information becomes the hub of nonsense. But we can say, well, we can look at it through a telescope, and it looks pretty barren where I'm coming from. We've had pictures from the Hubble telescope. It looks pretty empty. I've not seen people running around. Coming from Wales, we like our little sheep and our lambs, and there's no lambs jumping around there either. But we're looking at it from the wrong viewpoint. We're looking at it from a material viewpoint. And as we look from material, we ignore the spiritual. So we cannot see what is blindly in front of us. It's like many years ago I was reading a news report and this guy was going to the big mountain, is Uluru in Australia. And he stopped and he asked the police where was it, and the police looked at him blank. He was drunk and the mountain was directly in front of him. Plainly in sight, but through his own eyes he couldn't see. And we do this with spiritual knowledge. As many of you know, I spend quite a lot of time away from you all, and contrary to popular belief, I don't go around chasing women and getting drunk. I've relegated to that on days that don't end with Y, and apparently every day ends with a Y. But I do get to visit schools, and schools are very, very interesting. Primary schools, the children very much accept Krishna as God. High school's a little bit different. And the other week I got to go to a sixth form. And it was an open question and answer. Open question and answer is very interesting because you never quite know what you're going to get thrown at you. The headmaster said, well, I don't know if there's going to be some people doing RE. It's going to be a mixed bunch. However, it soon came apparent that there were people of RE. Because one lad turned around and said, well, it occurs to me that people of your faith want moksha. And that is the only aim. Anybody here want moksha? Anybody? No takers? Shall I explain this as explanation of moksha before we commit? Because I better go and check, because he might know something that I don't. And I wanted to check his authority as well. So I said, okay, can you explain to me what moksha is, and also who told you? So he said, well, my RE teacher told me. Okay. Moksha is where you merge in and become one with Brahma. Anybody want that? Anybody looking for merging into one as Brahma? Any takers? I actually turned around and said, it's interesting because everybody that I know aren't looking to merge into one with Brahma. Again, observational when you're working in the Pujari department is you actually realize how wonderful this personal relationship that you can develop with Krishna is. And there's one particular Mataji, and she normally doesn't smile. However, she has the most beautiful smile ever when she's serving Sri Radha Gokulananda. If you're very fortunate, you might catch a glimpse of it. Because this is love, isn't it? Is that we want to this personal relationship with Krishna. But we, through our mental speculation, we devolve impersonalism, don't we? So I explained to God, well, hang on a minute, I've brought you some lovely garnet-eyed deities. Why am I bothering to develop a personal relationship with Krishna if my aim is to merge with Brahma? It seems a little bit odd. Yes, I want liberation from material suffering, because I've been around for a few years now, and it's not good. I think that's another reason why I miss being away from the devotees, is because I have to listen to so much rubbish. Although recently the most intelligent conversation I've had is with an 18-month-old. They're super intelligent. We had Bob the Builder, Ben 10, Rosie and Jim meet Krishna Day and Radha. It was very much good fun. However, cooking with an 18-month-old is a little bit messy. But we enjoyed offering the cake to Krishna, and Krishna enjoyed eating them, which was the main point. And the child went home, Mummy, Mummy, I was playing with Krishna today. So we see that the scientist had mundanely speculated that the moon rock was just a moon rock with the same constitution as rocks that we find in the earth. We find that the student had to do what his teacher told him. The teacher told him the moksha was to merge in, and that was the aim of everybody. So we go along with that. And we don't actually have this clear spiritual vision. So we're here to get our spiritual vision cleaned, because it's a little bit messy. And it's interesting, anybody here does gardening? Any gardeners? No? Anybody does crops? It's interesting, certain crops you have to actually plant at night. If you want a good amount of crops, nighttime is the best time to plant. Now, the scientists can't explain why this is. And again, it's because they're not looking at it from Shastra. They're looking at it from a material scientific point of view. It's always going to end in disaster. Prabhupada, when he was really questioned about the moon landing, because it was quite predominant, and Prabhupada said, well, if they did land in the moon, they've landed in the wrong part, because on the Earth planet we have deserts, so why don't we have deserts on the moon planet? This is logical. And he said, but also the material scientist, because I've studied Shastra and I know that circling the moon is another little planet called Rahu. I think they landed there. Man is not very intelligent, of which woman would actually agree with. Yes. We speculate a lot, don't we? Yeah. Our mental concoctions are terrible. Now, as some of you know, I sort of came from a little bit of a different background. And I'm just going to digress a little bit. It'll all come together at the end. And so I came from what some people would call a background of a cult. Some people call it a pseudo-Christian background. In many ways, I'm grateful for the upbringing that I had, because it protected me from a lot of the nonsense that we see. However, I decided that what I wanted to do was wanted to reread the Bible in the context of a devotee. It's amazing what is in there if you have spiritual vision. And one of my earliest recollections of the story that came most in my mind was the story of Cain and Abel. Is anybody familiar with the story of Cain and Abel? Yeah? Some of you would have covered the story of Cain and Abel. And they were actually very pious men. It's interesting that if you look at the Bible goes from a very personal perspective, where people having deep personal relationships with Krishna, with God, to an impersonal where actually they have to go through an intermediate and they really don't grasp God. If you look at the Bible, it's the reversal of the Gita, because the Gita goes us from the darkness of ignorance and takes us into the light. The Bible shows how we've fallen from the light to the darkness. Yeah? At least we've got something. So I was rereading the story of Cain and Abel. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Bible stories, Cain and Abel were brothers. And being pious men, they made offerings every day to the Lord. One of them was very proud of the fact that he produced so much meat. He was very good at looking after the animals, sort of, because he killed them in the end. It always seems a bit of an odd relationship, I think, farmers and animals. They love them so much that in the end they kill them. And I've never quite grasped that one. And the other one, he was a farmer. He just did grains and fruits and vegetables. And there's a bit of rivalry between the two. Because each day they would make a brilliant offering. One would make sure that he's got the nice slice of meat. And the other one would make sure that the fruit and the vegetables were just right. Okay. Now, for those that don't know the Bible story, would you like to hazard a guess as to which one God accepted? Time and time and time again. Anyone? The fruit, the vegetables. Why? Sastra clearly states that that's what Krishna likes. If we read it, it doesn't say, and Krishna likes a little bit of chicken on the side. If anybody can find me that quote, please show it me. I can guarantee you'll never find it. It's a pointless endeavour. So the Bible clearly indicates that actually that meat eating is wrong, so it makes you wonder why those that say that they adhere to the Bible are eating meat. It also tells us something about what happens to the mentality of the individual that eats the meat. Because they lose their spiritual vision. It goes. It's interesting when you visit schools, the moment you mention cow protection, people become very, very vocal. They might be quite up to that point, but as soon as you mention cow protection, I find an interesting way of dealing with that one. But meat eating clouds the vision. We cannot see the spiritual anymore. Mundane education does exactly the same. My master's student couldn't veer off the remit that he'd been given by the facilitator. The student doing RE could not question further than what his teacher was actually presenting. The spiritual eyes were clouded. Yeah, it's a bit like a cataract. It's in front of you, you can't see it. Yeah? So what happens when you haven't got spiritual vision? Lust, anger, greed. It becomes a breeding ground. Does it not? He became infuriated. Really, really mad. To the point where his intelligence had gone completely. I have given him the best slice that I could. My best. I was going to save that for myself, but I gave it, and he rejected it for some vegetables from him. He's the most impious person I've ever met on this planet. I hate him. We don't see glorification of devotee there, do we? Wow. He's getting God's mercy. What's he doing that I'm not? I want to go and get a bit of that. Oh, he's giving vegetables, right? I'm going to go and start planting some vegetables because maybe God will show some mercy to me. Meat eating dulls the senses and makes you stupid. The outcome of the story, anybody know the outcome? Anybody who hasn't read the story know the outcome of the story? Want to hazard a guess? Any takers? What happens when you become so infuriated that you can't control your senses? Shri Radhika Kulananda, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Shri Gaunitai Jai. What happens? You want to kill the person, that's how the story ends. He kills the devotee of Krishna. The one that's presenting Krishna every day with wonderful food grains, he kills. What is one thing we all know we're not meant to do? Blaspheme a devotee. He'd already done that. Kill a devotee. And it's quite obvious reading it that he was actually a Brahmana, because a Brahmana knows how to do the sacrifices very nicely and do the offerings very nicely. So he was a Brahmana because he was doing the offerings very, 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 very nicely. Wow. His intelligence suddenly kicked in. It's a little bit too late. And what's one thing you cannot do? You cannot hide from Krishna. It doesn't matter where he went. He knew that God was well on his way. And boy, was he mad. Yeah. His best friend, who offers him grains every day, that was very, very dear to him, had just been killed by a meat-eating, animal-hating monster. And yet those that say that they understand Scripture don't understand that particular point. There's also other instances within the Bible where God rejects the sacrifice of meat and meat eating. They claim to be disciples of Jesus, and yet even Jesus, when it came to the sacrament, did not use any form of meat. It was noticed that in the last meal that Jesus ever took, there was no meat product there. Vegetarian. Yeah? So we can have the information in front of us clearly and still miss the point. The scientists, with all their scientific endeavour, still miss the point. Because they go with their own material senses, with no understanding of the spiritual. In fact, they look down at people who have a spiritual background and go, well, you're an idiot. Look at our scientific endeavour. Look what we've achieved. According to their own calculations, man has only been on the earth for a very, very short space of time. The animals have been there for a lot longer, and the plants a little bit longer than that. And man, with all his scientific endeavour, has managed to ruin it. Yeah? Can we trust such people? Prabhupada sometimes was very, very cutting in his remarks, and sometimes rightly so. And sometimes we need to be ourselves quite forthright in what we're saying. So, anyway, let me just catch my thought again. It reminds me of, again, I quite like observing. And there was one consultant that I got to work with. And what time do we finish? 8:30. Okay, so I'll just quickly do this. I'll just read one letter from Prabhupada and then take questions. I quite liked working with this particular consultant because unlike a lot of consultants who are very proud of their scientific endeavour, he had actually had one poignant realisation. It didn't matter what he did. The cure or the non-cure, life and death were not in his hands as the consultant. He was mocked a lot because he realised that actually God decided. He gave him some knowledge so he can relieve some suffering. But ultimately, if the life would end, then the life would end. And one day I was transferred from my beloved, at the time I was working on a lovely children's unit in this private hospital, and sometimes there was no children, so they'd move me down to one of the other wards and move me down to acute medical. And the consultant said, oh, well, you can come with me because there's a guy here. And I've got to give him some bad news. But he doesn't like women because women are stupid. Yeah? We met people like that. Yeah. We like the fact that women are there to puff the pillows, what have you, don't give an opinion. Yeah? Sad, aren't they? And so I said, okay. So I went in and he went through the full diagnosis, went through the tests with him and said, I'm really, really sorry, but there's nothing more I can do. The guy was infuriated. I have worked hard all my life. I have achieved what you cannot achieve. I have a multi-million-pound empire. I can afford any treatment and will never die. Yeah? And consultant said, well, he said, I'm telling you that you're not going to see the month out, so what I really suggest is that you make sure that your affairs are in order, and if you're a religious man, make peace with God. Because that's the most important thing. They were the words not to use. I knew it, you are a charlatan. God? What's God ever done? Yeah? Mentality of a meat eater. I forgot to mention that the consultant was a vegetarian. Vegetarians make you intelligent. Gives you strength. I demand to get a proper doctor. I want a second opinion. It doesn't matter. The outcome is going to be the same. Okay? So they made arrangements for him to have a second consultant. Consultants in private hospitals cost a lot of money. I got back up to the children's ward, and a week later they transferred me back to the same ward. The same man was still there. The consultant said, can you come with me, because he seriously has a problem with women. In fact, 2 of them have left his room crying. And I've got to break the same sad news that the consultant had broken the week before. Okay. The lack of spiritual vision. So I went in and thought, I really can't be doing with this guy. He was furious. But luckily for him, his beloved daughter had been on the internet and found a cure in the United States of America. The consultant was aware of it. It was in its preliminary stages and was actually found only useful at the very beginning of his illness. He was quite advanced. Okay, men generally, when they present in the hospital, their symptoms are advanced. Women are very good at getting medical treatment. They're a lot more intelligent, So that's probably why women last a lot longer, is that they're more intelligent, in tune with the body. Men think, it's okay. I demand that you make arrangements for me to go to America for this treatment. For I have money, I have worked hard, and you are just saying that because of your God-fearing idiot of a friend. He clocked that the consultants were friends. And most consultants know consultants that work within the same field. It's not unusual. Well, it's going to waste your money. You are going to die. I don't care how much it's cost. You make the arrangements. So he did. A couple of months later, I bumped into the consultant and said, well, out of curiosity, how did he get on with this wonderful treatment? Oh, he died on the plane, on the way to the cure that was going to save him, that he'd never die. The foolish lack of spiritual vision caused by the foolish act of animal slaughter. The cloud that descends because we do not understand even the smallest thing as to the importance of the moon and the Moon King, the importance of that lineage, the importance of the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, and the impact that has on our everyday lives. And I said I was going to just end briefly on a little letter from Prabhupada. And again, he's talking about planets again, and what the devotees actually truly desire, and it's not moksha, liberation, to the impersonal Brahma. He said, the most important of the Vaikuntha planets is called Krishna Loka, or Goloka Vrindavan. In these days, the propagation for landing on the moon planet is very encouraging to the common man. But, so far as the Krishna conscious person is concerned, he is not at all interested in any of the material planets. His target is to be transferred to the topmost spiritual planet, namely Krishna Loka. So this initiation means that preliminary chance for preparing oneself to achieve the highest perfection. I am very glad that you are already interested in the Krishna consciousness movement, and you will please chant at least 16 rounds daily. Observe the rules and regulations. The 4 principal rules is that you will refrain from meat eating or partaking of fish and eggs, illicit sexual connections, intoxication including cigarettes, coffee and tea, and gambling. And on that point, I shall ask for any questions, corrections, thoughts, ponderings.